very much, Joe. Now I've got a wrong setting here, haven't I? We should be following my speaker. I'll fiddle with that in a minute. Let's introduce everybody first of all. Kaiyee, Sarah, Adam. We're going to have a conversation today about the future of could this subject be any more important at the moment? Sustainability. We've got all sorts of things we can talk about. Again, I'm going to encourage the audience, please put questions for the panel into the Q&A section at the bottom. The more awkward and difficult, the better, as far as I'm concerned, because I'm not answering them. That'll be down to Sarah, Kaiyee and Adam. But maybe we could just start off. Perhaps you could each just tell us a little bit about your backgrounds just to set the scene. Can we start with Kaiyee, please?
Okay, hi, Kaiyee Burnett. Been with BT quite a number of years, 17 years, and focused in the last 10 years in the global banking finance sector, and working with IT leaders in this area. Really particularly interested in the sustainability side of things because of the work that BT are doing in this space and have been doing for a number of years.
Thank you, Kaiyee. Adam.
Great. Hi, everyone. Adam Turner. I work for the Department of Environment. I've been doing sustainable ICT for about the last 15 years now, initially in the Ministry of Defence, and now my responsibility is across all government departments, agencies and bodies and the wider public sector. And we own and deliver the policy and the strategy for government as well as the annual reporting.
Thank you very much. And Sarah, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Burnett. I'm an industry analyst and a newly published author, which I'm very excited about. I'm currently Chief Technology Evangelist at KYP.ai, which is a process intelligence company.
Lovely, thank you. Now, let's start off by just talking about some of the big issues that we face in sustainability. When we were planning this, one of the first things we talked about was the hardware life cycle, because recently our Director of Policy, Bill Mitchell, talked about this in the media, quite widely reported that we should be extending our life cycles because particularly of hardware side of things. Perhaps first of all, I can come to Kaiyee on that with some views from you there, please.
Yeah, so absolutely, really important part. And one of the things that we talked about was about rare metals, and that was one area we spoke about, but also in that whole piece around sustainability and thinking about, as we design new platforms, new systems, how are we looking at recycling and reusing the materials that are in the ecosystem. And one of the key commitments that we have is that we will have a commitment, because it's a requirement for policy, but also it's something that we're driving, which is how do we reuse that equipment, recycle and support our consumers, also businesses that consume our technology, to be able to do that. And one of the ways that we do that, for example, in the EE world, is that we take in the mobile phones, we have them recycled and reused. We also work with our supply chain, and that's one of the commitments we have, is making sure that our supply chains are committed to the same level of commitment that we are, because only in that way can we ensure that the whole system is circular.
Absolutely. Adam.
So much. I'll try and be concise. From a government point of view, circularity is one of 3 key areas in our government strategy. We've got clear targets in this for every government department, so that covers 500,000 end users and about £6 billion annual spend. So we've got 0 to landfill, fairly obvious one, but an annual increase in the amount of remanufactured ICT. So remanufactured ICT has got a bit of a cultural issue in that people don't necessarily think it's as good as new. The really good news here is that there is now a kite mark that you can use as a rubber stamp on your remanufactured kit that proves it's as good as new. And there's loads of really good academia out there. I encourage you to look at the work of TechBuyer, University of East London in this space. The reason this is important is that we're not going to stand a chance of hitting net zero unless we build a circular model of ownership into our IT. And the way we do that is from the top down, as Kaiyee said, building it into development and design of IT. This isn't something that could be picked up just by commercial or just by procurement. This is about options when you're designing your systems. so that you're making sure you are removing waste from the system effectively, whether that's data or unused servers, or stop bolting more and more stuff onto it. But also think, as we've said, as Brian said, about lifespans of IT. You know, Moore's law doesn't really stack up anymore. So this idea that we're continually improving with IT isn't necessarily true. The stuff that we've got is really, really good. So we can extend the lifespan of it, design better, design leaner, and then we have a more resilient operation, which, as we've seen, as Brian hinted at when we started, what's going on over East Way, is really, really important that we recognise the importance of this in sustaining our digital operations.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Adam. Now, Sarah, I just want to come to you about this whole idea of built-in obsolescence. When we have an preparation for this meeting, we were talking about servers that drive particularly blockchain applications, which almost automatically obsolete after 18 months because of their speed. Actually, Tom C has just put a little comment. It's also about support, isn't it? Chromebook life cycles are poor because Google doesn't support them beyond 4 years. So, you know, this is a mindset shift, isn't it? Oh, have I? Is Sarah with me?
She looks like she's frozen.
Oh. She has. Well, okay. When Sarah comes back, we'll bring her back into the conversation. Let's come back to you, Kaiyee. Let's talk about the mindset shift in this, because, you know, IT leaders have got a key role to play here, haven't they?
They do. And actually, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was procurement. So there is a desire to do something, and then there's a requirement to do something. If throughout the supply chain, people are requiring their counterparts, people that provide into them, that requirement that things are sustainable, that feeds into circular economy, that we only buy things that are circular and can be repurposed, then it puts pressure for up the supply chain, and that comes round, because actually in terms of technology terms, there's no sort of, you know, starting point. Everything comes round, so it's putting that demand and putting that pressure, and as we increase that pressure, you start looking at innovation. How can we do this? Because there's a requirement for this, and looks like Sarah's back on now. But absolutely, it is a mindset change, and it isn't one. You know, the IT industry can help that, because this is where it comes. But actually, you know, with innovation technology, we just look at, for example, BT. You know, we are in the IT industry, but actually, for example, we provide the technology in steel manufacturing. So, you know, what innovation can we bring into that area that will help with, you know, looking at reducing carbon emissions?
So, Sarah, you're back with us now, Sarah. Good. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for Lee and Kaiyee. Sarah, let me ask you. Your particular area is the autonomous enterprise, isn't it? People want to have a competitive advantage, and they often equate that with having something faster and quicker. And how do we balance those mindsets?
So I think we have to rely more on good data and analysis to identify where the waste is happening. So there's one thing about raw materials and sourcing materials and returning them back to net zero kind of thing, but there's also the way that we use technology, and we have a lot of data, but really we are information poor because we don't do enough analysis. And what I mean by that is, for example, you know, online supermarkets that run analysis millions of times a day to make sure that they don't get food wastage. You know, they reduce the amount of food that is wasted because it goes out of sell-by date. So there's this other aspect, the usage aspect. And I think by building targets that are within normal everyday efficiency requirements that are specifically about the environment, we can offset some of the challenges that we face in the sort of production of hardware and the waste of these materials as well.
So it's probably a few folks, maybe it's just my cynicism, that would say this all sounds very nice, but where do we start? There's a deluge of information. One of the things we discussed in our prep was that sometimes that information is not as unbiased as we perhaps would like it to be. Adam, can I come to you on this? You're smiling about that.
Gosh. So the example I would give is what we've been doing across government is this whole area used to be called Green IT 10, 12 years ago. And we started to baseline, and it's really important if you're going to be bringing sustainability into your organization, you very much need to baseline what you're doing. So what we do across government is look at basically your asset register, apply a bunch of carbon figures and energy use figures to that, also look at our waste and all of this kind of stuff. And we come up with a figure, which is absolutely massive, obviously, in terms of energy use, lots and lots of kilowatts and lots of carbon. And then obviously there's been a push towards moving to the cloud. So the long-term trajectory for our reports across government was that our footprint has been going down. And if you look at the first 3 or 4 or 5 years of government reports on this, you will see a lovely curve going down. And of course, sustainability reporting is still probably thought of as a bit of a tick box, nice to have, look at how bright and shiny we are and how wonderful we are. So in 2018, I came along and said, you do realize that 90% of our footprint is probably with our service providers. We should probably be asking them what our footprint is. Initially, we went out to all of our hosting providers across government. And bear in mind, this is the commercial teams from every single government department. And I mentioned that 6 billion annual spend. It carried some weight. The response from industry was a flat no. Either we can't or we won't. And we've spent the last 4 years working with them to try and get some sensible figures. You may have seen in the press this week that AWS have launched a carbon reporting tool, which is very welcome from my point of view. The problem is with it, we're not being shared the background working to how they've come up with the figures. And to be clear, this is a carbon footprint tool for the services that we as customers are consuming. This is not an Amazon figure. This is not even an AWS figure. This is you are consuming a product in AWS, and this is the carbon response for it, because where we need to get to is that we need to be designing into the cloud for sustainability. So anyway, the figures are interesting. They only cover the initial scope of operations. They don't really cover the bulk of it, what we call scope 3. So basically everything down the supply chain. And that is a system that is kind of across the mold in terms of technology, in that the information that's out there is largely written and provided by the companies that want to sell us the stuff. And what's really hard to get hold of is independent advice and guidance on this that hasn't been influenced by industry, because it's becoming really, really critical that as we're seeing, as Sarah was saying, increasingly dependent on data. That means more servers, more hosting, more network kit, more energy use. So in order to understand our true footprint, we really, really need accurate data from the people providing our services and our equipment so that we can best manage it.
So, Kaiyee, you're a big service provider.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Not personally, but you know.
Absolutely, and Adam, I know we sort of exchanged messages. I have to respond to you in terms of the questions that you asked, but something that we are doing to fill the gaps around accuracy measurement and visibility of energy use is that we've partnered, and one of the things that we talked about was how are we not biased, because obviously we are a service provider. So we've partnered with the University of Groningen in the Netherlands to look at a methodology to collect and measure the energy use of SaaS cloud service that that is academically and corporately auditable, and that is a starting point. It's giving organisations that we work with a tool that helps them actually measure how much energy use is actually being consumed, and that's because as you said, Adam, just because you've moved your data and services to the cloud doesn't mean that you've eliminated the energy cost. It's just been placed elsewhere. So we're starting and looking at ourselves. So we're looking at our BT data centres and contact centres, and then we'll extend that to cloud providers. So this is work that is, as I say, we're doing in collaboration with the University of Groningen. And hopefully what we'll see is some sort of level of measure, some kind of best practice, and something that actually organisations that we're working with can see and then can compare, and we can see best practice, and we can see areas where there are high energy users, and we can potentially compare cloud providers and show actually where are we most efficient and where there's more work to be done. But it is that sort of that independent verification and being able to see the data yourselves and being able to audit that data is where we need to get to.
If I may jump in, I think that thanks. That transparency is really important, and I've come across data where, for example, Forrester research says 69% of European adults want businesses to be more transparent about how they conduct their business, and they increasingly want them to do good for society. And I've got the data down here. 47% of Europeans say they regularly purchase from brands that align with their personal values, but we don't know which ones align with our personal values because of the lack of transparency, which is what Adam was mentioning earlier as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you.
The world of B2C is always ahead of B2B, isn't it? These waves of change come from the consumers and put pressure, eventually gets through to the B2B world. Yeah.
Well, one of the questions I wanted to put to the panel, and feel free, whoever wants to leap in here, some of the research you did, which we're going to let all the attendees of this conference have a link to later on, we asked about sustainability priorities in organizations, and we asked IT professionals and IT leaders. We tried to split out managers from practitioners, I suppose, and the practitioners seem to be more concerned actually about sustainability than the leaders. Now, is that normal? Is this a quirk of our research, or is that normal? Who'd like to come in on that?
I don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead, Adam. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's this international picture that we know about millennials and the new generations coming through, and yeah, there's lots of figures around, aren't there, Sarah? Around sort of 70%, 2/3, 3/4 being really, really key here. From an IT leader's point of view, this topic, as I say, goes back a while. And what we've seen is a trend in the early 2010s, and then it dropped off a cliff, and there's a lack of expertise across the IT profession to do this, and this is built on a lack of frameworks for people and a lack of training and a lack of skills to do this. So it's really, really key. There's a new generation coming through, and we've seen this across government in IT sustainability communities that have got thousands of people on them, really keen to understand this. But across government departments, and sorry if I keep mentioning departments, but that's kind of where I am. You've literally got, say, MOD would have 2 people, and they've got 200,000 end users looking at sustainability. And as for IT, and as we're talking about here, we're talking about e-waste. The biggest waste problem in the world is e-waste. We've got data, we've got supply chains, we've got slavery, we've got social value, we've got all of these areas, and it's absolutely huge. And this is not yet being picked up by IT leaders. The Computer Weekly article last week said the top 5 trends for 2022 for all CIOs, at number 4 was sustainability. And that's because as organizations are setting net zero targets, ecological emergency, they're looking to their IT and digital departments and saying, how can you help? And these IT departments are going, what? And that's not me mocking them in any way, but there isn't the level of skills and training in the organizations, because as somebody mentioned earlier, security trumps everything when you look at operating systems, and that's wrong, because we should be thinking more about resilience. So there's this lack of depth of knowledge and expertise to do this, and there's this huge wealth of really driven, passionate young professionals coming through that want to make this change. And what I'd love to see BCS do, honestly, is pick up the Green ICT banner that there already is a group, and push that on, and perhaps rename it as a sustainability group or the resilience group or something, and make it big and strong, and start building skills and stuff into the profession, so that we can actually do this properly rather than just being seen as a tick box exercise.
I mean, yeah, that's a good point. Sustainability is one of our 4 main pillars, of course. I'll feed back to the Green SG as to whether they want to change their name. That's not for me to sort of decide upon, obviously, but that's an interesting bit of feedback. Sarah, you're going to come in on this particular subject as well.
I echo what Adam has said. I think skills is really important, and we haven't developed skills that would mean we create software, we write software that is more sustainable than it's been. I mean, the number of times we use IO, the number of times we access memory and networks and so on, how does, can we optimize those so that our software is more efficient? I think these are really important things, and we've never really developed the skills for those. And there's a massive shortage of skills anyway. And I'm really worried. In fact, there are two things I think will make a difference. One is the costs of everything going up at the moment will push organizations to visit these different aspects that they've not explored before. And secondly, I think it could also go completely the other way, which is sustainability will become an even lower priority than it is today. But I'm really hopeful that if you tie efficiency and cost cutting to the impact on the environment, we will see some net effect that is positive for the environment. And adding the right set of skills, I think, is one of those big contributors.
Okay, thank you. Well, now we've had a question just come in. What would you say are the skills needed that we need to develop so that we can optimize for IT sustainability? Kaiyee, do you have a thought there?
Yeah, so it's interesting because actually one of the things that I talked about earlier was data. It's what data do you need to measure sustainability? What data do you need to measure energy consumption and replacement energy consumption? How do you process that data? How do you put all of that information together to, so there's a bit about data analytics that's required here. And how do you get to that place? So there's that in terms of the overall and looking at that, but also in terms of you talked about the millennials being sort of the group that is really sort of forward thinking and driving this. And is there a bit about educating those of us that are not millennials and that don't have sustainability in our ingrained into us yet, and that's something that as an organization we are doing to look at how, for example, you start off in your own homes, so you start embedding those activities in terms of sustainability into your own lives. So we ran a trial last year with a group called Hubbub, which looks at how do we make our homes smarter and more sustainable, what things can we do to reduce energy consumption. So there's various elements I think that we need to look at in terms of those skills. So data and data analytics for the IT leaders, embedding sustainability into employees, so throughout the organisation, and bringing those two together with the tools as well, to be able to then move the organisations forward and focusing on sectors. So as IT professionals, if there are other organisations on here that are working in these sectors, it's focusing on those where there is the highest levels of energy consumption. So in energy, manufacturing, agriculture and transport, and it's focusing on those areas first, with the eye to looking at sort of the other areas too.
Lovely. So the skills work for the information age, skills framework for the Sophia, skills framework for the information age, I'll get that right eventually, does have some sustainability and elements in it. I know, Adam, you don't feel that's enough just yet.
No, it used to have 4 key skills, basically kind of from a design level up to a senior manager level, and now it's just got a single skill. I think everything that Kaiyee said was absolutely bang on. From an IT leader point of view, you need sustainability up there on your top dashboard, along with other stuff, and that could be on a project basis. So you've got your portfolio of stuff that's going on in your organization. What I suggest and what I say to people is you basically want something up there that says red, amber, green around number of projects and programs that have been assessed for sustainability. At the bottom of that, as Kaiyee said, bang on, we've got something called the responsible digital citizen as a concept across government, and we're trying to get everyone to recognise that everything they do in whatever job they do has a sustainability impact, whether that's energy consumption or waste or whatever. From an IT professional point of view, the key area for me is architecture. You build that into your principles within your architecture. You've probably got 10, 12, 20 principles. One of those needs to be sustainability. So you hit that at the front end. You also need somebody in strategy. You need somebody in your business relationship management, your supplier management, and then in your product and user design space. And really, that's just, it's cross-cutting, and it's about upskilling lots and lots of people across to include sustainability as part of the way they just do business as usual. So ultimately, you don't need people like me evangelizing about this in organizations. It just becomes part of what we do, and a huge chunk of what we do.
Interesting. And I think it'd be remiss of me not to just pursue with you, Adam, your concern with Cristiano Ronaldo's tweeting.
Do you want me to bring that up? I mean,
Yeah,
it's just recognizing that when the general public talk about sustainability, we talk about meat and flights and waste and plastic, quite rightly, but actually one of the biggest areas of consumption on this planet, and I've already mentioned that e-waste is the biggest problem, is social media and media streaming, and it makes up about 60% of the IT energy consumption, which represents about 4% of global energy consumption, which is the same as the aircraft industry. So when somebody like Cristiano Ronaldo pumps out a picture on his Instagram to his 190 million followers, or however many he's got, you're looking at that to be replicated and visualized on people's end user devices, the same energy consumption as 4 to 5 UK households for a year. And if you look at the energy consumption on YouTube of videos that have had billions of views, you are talking about energy consumptions almost the same as small countries. Now, there's a lot of people out in the industry that say this is rubbish, this is not what's going on. But what we know is there are facts here that energy, data growth is exponential, true use of that words. We've seen examples around the world of data centers and stuff consuming so much energy that in places like Ireland that people can't boil their kettles. I know that was a minor incident, but it's just a direction of travel in which we're going. And it's for us recognizing that, you know, really simple things like turning off automatic uploads of your pictures to the cloud is going to have a benefit if we're a bit more careful about how we consume media. We need to just be aware of the impact of what we're doing.
Some sort of user guide for sustainability best options would be useful, wouldn't it? Like turning off automatic uploads is an interesting thing. You wouldn't think about it, would you? Really? But thank you for that example.
Well, someone's mentioned Bitcoin in the question, and again, there's you get this is what we were on about earlier about different sides of the industry saying different things. But yeah, I mean, I think the latest estimate I saw was the same energy consumption as Argentina, just for Bitcoin. And World Wildlife Fund, green charity, launched a model for NFTs based on Ethereum. They had to take it down within a day because they realized that they were causing more environmental harm than good by launching this operation.
That is very interesting. Well, look, we're 28 minutes into this conversation, folks. There's so much more we could talk about, I know, because we've talked about it offline as well. But can I thank you for your comments? It's been really interesting. Now, thank you to the audience for putting their questions in as well. Can I come to each of you, just ask one final question? Maybe each of you could give me your views. Just where should we start? So if there's an IT leader watching now, or a potential IT leader, what's the starting point? Maybe some accurate places to go for data. Kaiyee, could I start with you?
You've taken the words out of my mouth, Brian. Yes, please. You know, start looking at the data. Start looking at how you're measuring it. Talk to your service providers, and start asking for that information. If you're in procurement, if you're in IT, well, as an IT leader, you will procure things. How are your suppliers providing you with services? You know, we use a company called EcoVadis that does measurements as well, and it's something, for example, that we've been asked as an organisation. Could you provide your sustainability ratings? When you start demanding that of industry, then you start creating that momentum.
Lovely, thank you, Adam.
Okay, someone's just popped in that it's all relative, and it is, and that's really, really important. So for me, as IT leaders and future IT leaders, to do this, it comes from the top. Be really passionate about it and drive it into your organizations. And at a really simple level, just assess for sustainability, impacts and benefits, everything that you're doing. And as the point was made there, traditional banking versus Bitcoin, look at that as part of your assessment. That's absolutely right. If the assessment is that Bitcoin is better, Bitcoin's absolutely fine. All we're trying to say here is that just because we're disconnected from the environmental impact of digital.
Yeah.
That's all we're trying to say.